While staying in West Africa, the Burkina Faso government has clarified that it has asked ex-colonial ruler France to pull its troops out of the insurgency-hit country within a month. France has about 400 special forces soldiers in junta-ruled Burkina Faso, but relations have deteriorated and tensions have soared in recent months. Government spokesman Jean-Emmanuel Ouagadougou confirmed that the agreement, which allows French forces to be in Burkina Faso, had been terminated. He adds that this also ends diplomatic relations between Burkina Faso and France.
What happens when the very people who promise to protect you are the ones quietly profiting from your suffering? This is the question that drove Burkina Faso to make one of the most shocking decisions in modern African history, kicking out France, the same nation that once called itself a partner in progress. For decades, Burkina Faso's relationship with France was like a chain wrapped in velvet. On the outside, it looked polished, civil, and diplomatic, but beneath the surface, it was heavy and suffocating. To the outside world, French soldiers were stationed in Ouagadougou to help fight terrorism. French companies invested in Burkinabe industries. French advisors shaped policies. Yet to the Burkinabe people, this was not partnership. It was dependency dressed up as assistance. Burkina Faso is not a country without wealth. Beneath its soil lies gold, so much gold that it ranks as Africa's fourth largest producer. Yet walk through the rural towns and villages, and you see a different reality. Crumbling schools, understaffed hospitals, children carrying firewood instead of books, farmers unable to buy fertilizer for their crops. How can a nation so rich in resources remain shackled by poverty? The answer, many began to realize, lay in who controlled the gold. French and other foreign companies operated the largest mines, exporting billions while paying Burkina Faso a fraction. The resources were flowing out, but the wealth wasn't staying in. To the average Burkinabe, the golden soil beneath their feet might as well have belonged to Paris. As if poverty wasn't enough, the country faced an even deadlier threat. Beginning in 2015, Burkina Faso became the target of a growing insurgency by Islamist militant groups.
Over the past 2 weeks, increasing jihadist aggressions in southeastern Burkina Faso have pushed hundreds of Burkinabes across the border into Ghana. These displaced Burkinabes are said to have come from communities in the Zouaga department, where armed men linked to the Jnim terrorist group have since the beginning of this year allegedly launched coordinated attacks targeting the security and defense forces, including the civilian auxiliary forces known as VDPs or Kugluwegu. The terrorists were said to have attacked the border communities of Zerboko, Yoga, Zebere and Zoga, where they looted and in some cases set ablaze a police station and also ordered the people to end any cooperation or collaboration with the state security forces or face collective punishment the next time they return.
The rise of Traore. It was against this backdrop of poverty, insecurity, and dependency that a young soldier, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, rose to power in September 2022. At just 34 years old, he became the world's youngest head of state, and he didn't waste time making his position clear. In fiery speeches, Traoré spoke the words millions had been waiting to hear. We refuse to be the slaves of imperialism. We choose to fight for our sovereignty. His message wasn't polished diplomacy. It was raw, emotional, and unapologetic, and it resonated. Crowds filled the streets of Ouagadougou waving Burkinabe flags and chanting his name. Across radios, in market squares, and on social media, his defiant words spread like wildfire. For the first time in years, many citizens felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could reclaim what was theirs. And then came the historic moment. In early 2023, Traoré's government gave France 1 month to withdraw all its troops from Burkinabe soil. French influence over security was cut off. French bases were dismantled. The tricolor flag that once flew over military compounds was lowered, replaced by the red, green, and yellow of Burkina Faso. Western media outlets framed the move as reckless, dangerous, even suicidal. How could a small, landlocked country, battling one of the deadliest insurgencies in Africa, dare to push away a superpower? But inside Burkina Faso, the decision was celebrated as liberation. It wasn't about whether they could survive without France. It was about dignity, about self-respect, about a nation reclaiming its right to stand on its own feet, even if those feet were bruised and unsteady. One young man in Ouagadougou was quoted saying, "We are poor, but we are not blind. We know who takes our gold. We know who controls our money. And we know who profits from our suffering. Enough is enough." The ripple effect. Burkina Faso's decision sent shockwaves across Africa. Neighboring Mali and Niger had already taken similar steps, expelling French troops and forging new paths with alternative allies. Together, these countries began forming the Alliance of Sahel States, a new bloc rejecting ECOWAS pressure and demanding independence from foreign dominance. It wasn't just about kicking out France, it was about rewriting the rules of Africa's relationship with the outside world. And this, perhaps, is the truth they won't tell you. Western governments don't want the world to see Africa waking up, standing tall, and saying no to the chains of dependency, because if Burkina Faso can do it, so can others. But the story doesn't end here. The fight for sovereignty comes with consequences: regional isolation, economic sanctions, and pressure from powerful blocs like ECOWAS. Before we continue, what do you think? Was Burkina Faso brave for kicking out France, or have they risked too much too soon? Drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and share this video so more people can hear the truth beyond the headlines. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before the Burkinabe people and declared that France must leave, it was more than a political decision. It was an act of defiance against decades of dependency. But to truly understand the weight of this moment, we need to look at what came next. The revolution, the backlash, and the secret truths that reveal why France was so desperate to hold on. A young leader, an old struggle. At just 34 years old, Traoré became the face of a generational shift. His rise symbolized something powerful: young Africans refusing to inherit the broken promises of the past. For decades, Burkina Faso cycled through governments that walked the fine line between resisting France and bowing to its influence. But Traoré didn't walk that line. He tore it apart. In his speeches, he tapped into something raw. He spoke of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader of the 1980s who tried to make Burkina Faso self-reliant before being assassinated in a coup widely believed to have foreign fingerprints all over it. Sankara's dream of independence was buried with him, until Traoré unearthed it. By invoking Sankara, Traoré wasn't just making political noise. He was reminding Burkinabe citizens of what they had lost: pride, dignity, and the vision of a country that could feed itself, defend itself, and thrive on its own terms. ECOWAS, friend or foe. But defying France came at a cost. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, a bloc often seen as a partner in regional stability, quickly turned into a tool of pressure. Sanctions, threats of isolation, and ultimatums followed. ECOWAS, influenced heavily by Western allies, argued that coups endangered democracy. But for many Burkinabe, that word, democracy, rang hollow. What good is democracy if elections are held under foreign-controlled systems, if leaders are puppets, if decisions are made not in Ouagadougou, but in Paris or Washington? People in Burkina Faso asked a different question. Who does ECOWAS really serve? Is it the people of West Africa, or the interests of those outside the continent who fear losing their grip? Despite ECOWAS threats, Burkinabe crowds poured into the streets to show their support for Traoré. They held placards reading, "Down with imperialism and sovereignty or death." For once, it felt like the will of the people outweighed the pressure of outside powers. The silent war over gold. And here's where the story takes a darker turn. France's interest in Burkina Faso wasn't only about counter-terrorism or maintaining influence, it was also about gold. Burkina Faso produces more than 50 tons of gold annually, making it one of the most resource-rich nations in the Sahel. But how much of that gold actually stays in Burkina Faso? Almost none. French and Western companies dominated the mining sector, funneling profits out of the country while locals were left with polluted water, unsafe mines, and empty promises of development. Leaked documents and independent investigations revealed just how lopsided these deals were. Burkinabe workers earned pennies while multinational firms raked in millions. Meanwhile, Burkina Faso remained one of the poorest countries in the world. This was the dirty secret. The insecurity narrative was convenient cover for a much older story: extraction. When Traoré ordered France out, he wasn't just targeting military bases. He was striking at the heart of the system. By reclaiming control over gold and other resources, Burkina Faso could finally begin building an economy that served its people, not foreign shareholders. Revolution on the streets. The Burkinabe Revolution wasn't fought with tanks or guns alone. It was fought in the streets, in the markets, in the conversations people had late at night under dim lanterns. One farmer told a local journalist, "We don't care if our stomachs are empty for now. At least the future of our children will be ours, not theirs." A young student shouted during a rally, "We are Sankara's children, we will not bow." This was not blind nationalism, it was a collective cry for dignity. Across the Sahel, Burkina Faso's courage lit sparks. Mali had already expelled French troops. Niger followed soon after. Together, these nations began to weave a new alliance, the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. It was a direct challenge not only to France, but to ECOWAS itself. For the first time, African nations were saying, if ECOWAS chooses to serve outside interests, then we will form our own bloc, one that serves us, the propaganda war. But France and its allies didn't retreat quietly. A wave of propaganda followed. International media outlets framed Traoré as a reckless soldier, a dictator, or a pawn of Russia. Stories painted Burkina Faso as unstable, collapsing, or on the brink of chaos. The West wanted the world to see Burkina Faso not as a sovereign nation reclaiming its dignity, but as a failed state making desperate choices. Inside Burkina Faso, however, the narrative was entirely different. To the people, Traoré wasn't a pawn. He was a symbol. A young man standing up to centuries of exploitation, no matter the cost. The truth they won't tell you. And here's the truth rarely told. France didn't lose Burkina Faso because of one man. It lost because of decades of broken promises. Because you cannot claim to fight terrorism while benefiting from instability. You cannot call yourself a partner while controlling another country's currency. You cannot speak of democracy while propping up leaders who serve outsiders more than their own people. What comes next? But revolutions are never easy. Kicking out France didn't magically solve insecurity. It didn't fill government coffers overnight. What it did was create space. Space to reimagine a future no longer chained to the old colonial powers. And in that space lies both opportunity and danger. Can Burkina Faso survive the storm of sanctions, isolation, and propaganda? Can it rebuild its security forces strong enough to fight terrorism without foreign control? Can it transform its gold wealth into real development for its people?
France is ordered to withdraw its troops from another African country, this time Burkina Faso. So what's behind the growing anger behind the former colonial power? And what does it mean for the fight against armed groups in West Africa? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Adrian Finnegan. Burkina Faso's military government has given French troops 1 month to leave the country. That's according to state media. French forces are in the West African nation as part of a campaign to drive out fighters linked to ISIL and Al-Qaeda. The UN estimates that thousands of people have been killed since 2015 and nearly 3 million displaced by violence that's been blamed on armed groups. Demonstrations against the French soldiers' presence have been held in the capital, Ouagadougou. Barbara Angopa reports.
Not by guns or politics alone. It was pushed out by the will of a people who decided they'd had enough. Now the world is watching. Will Burkina Faso's bold gamble pay off? Or will the combined weight of foreign pressure and regional isolation crush the revolution before it bears fruit? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the age of silent submission is over, and that's the story behind why Burkina Faso kicked out France. Before you leave, I want to hear from you. Do you believe Burkina Faso has taken the first step toward true sovereignty, or do you think the challenges ahead are too great to overcome? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe like this video, and share it so more people can see the truth behind the headlines.